Hello, welcome to Social Studies. We are going to learn about this man right here. His name is Cesar Chavez, and he was a protector of workers' rights. So today we are going to describe the life and contributions of Cesar Chavez, identify the main causes for which Cesar Chavez fought during his lifetime, explain the word discrimination, explain the concepts of nonviolence, civil rights, and human rights, which those last two, the last two objectives, you guys know. We've been talking about it this entire unit. Identify Martin Luther King Jr. as an important leader of civil rights movement, and describe working conditions for migrant workers. So our vocabulary today that you are going to be keeping your ears open for our heritage, culture, traditions, qualities, and possessions that are handed down from generation to generation. Instructing, which is teaching or guiding someone to do something. Migrant workers, people who travel from one area to another, usually in search of work such as harvesting crops. Organizer is someone who brings people and ideas together to accomplish a particular goal. Plight is a very difficult or bad situation or predicament. And strikes, stoppages of work until those in a position of power, such as employers, grant certain demands, such as higher pay or better working conditions. So we have learned a lot about different people who all had something to do with fighting for a cause. A lot of these causes had things to do with civil rights, human rights, things like that. We know that Susan B. Anthony fought for the right for women to vote. We had Eleanor Roosevelt. We had Mary McLeod Bethune. We had Jackie Robinson and Rosa Parks. We had Martin Luther King Jr. And now we have now we have Cesar Chavez. And that was that man right there. Okay. So Cesar Estrada Chavez was born in 1927 in the Gila River Valley near Yuma, Arizona. As the second of 6 children, Cesar and his siblings loved to explore the golden desert landscape and to gaze up at the sparkling desert sky that seemed to stretch out forever. Cesar was named after his grandfather, who had come to the United States from Mexico in 1880s. Cesar's grandfather had settled on a small ranch in the Gila River Valley. This was the very same ranch on which Cesar and his family now lived and worked. The Chavez family worked hard, and their farm was prosperous, meaning making money and thriving. Then tragedy struck. Rain stopped falling in the Gila River Valley, first one year and then the next. Without rain, the crops would not grow and the cattle died. This was also the time of the Great Depression, and Cesar's family, like so many others, lost their home. There was nothing else to do but to sell the ranch. And so when he was 10 years old, Cesar and his family moved to California to become migrant workers. People who traveled from farm to farm picking fruits and vegetables during harvest time. Like most migrant workers, Cesar and his family were poor, and they were often treated unfairly by people who hired them. They were paid very little money for the work that they did, and the work was very difficult. So they would go from different crops and different farms to find work, because once they have harvested all the fruits of the vegetables from the one farm, there would be nothing left until the next season. So they couldn't just stick around and not do anything. They would have to move on to the next farm to try and find work. Cesar and his family had to live in many different migrant worker camps. The camps were overcrowded, and many families had to share one bathroom. The Chavez family missed their ranch. They dreamed of going back to Arizona one day and buying back their home. However, migrant workers earned just a few cents a day for the backbreaking work that they did. There was no chance of ever being able to save money. Cesar's family was considered to be Hispanic because they were originally from Spanish-speaking country of Mexico. Hispanic or Latino people, just like African Americans, face discrimination and segregation. However, Cesar's family celebrated their Mexican heritage and spoke Spanish, the language of their ancestral home. So the word heritage means culture, tradition, qualities, and possessions that are handed down from generation to generation. Although it wasn't always easy, Cesar did go to school in various places in California. In fact, he went to more than 30 different schools. He later said that he was lucky to have graduated from middle school because his family moved around so much. Later in his life, Cesar told a story about an incident that happened to him at school. One day, Cesar accidentally spoke Spanish instead of English in his classroom. His teacher was not happy with him, and Cesar thought that he had done something wrong. Cesar felt that he had been treated unfairly, and it made him very sad. It was not possible. Whoops, I dropped the mic. Hold on. It was not possible for Cesar to go to high school because he was working in the fields. So he needed to work in the fields to help his family earn money. So it was not possible for him to go to high school. Whoops. Sorry, I'm trying to make it so the mic stays. However, during World War II, Cesar wanted to serve his country. He joined the Navy, and his family was very proud of him. After 2 years in the U.S. Navy, Cesar returned to life as a migrant farmer worker. Soon after his return, Cesar met and fell in love with Helen Fablia. The couple married and moved to San Jose, California. Cesar was one of the many Latino people who worked as migrant workers, moving from farm to farm, harvesting fruits and vegetables. The work was so hard and the hours were so long that many workers found that their health suffered. So think about this. They were working in the hot sun for 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. Their bodies did not have a chance to rest. And they were working under hard conditions where if you look, they're all hunched over, so their backs probably hurt a lot as well. They worked 7 days a week, 14 hours a day for very little pay. If they were injured or became sick, they found it difficult to pay for the hospital bills or the medical bills. These migrant workers were only employed during harvest time. And of course, migrant workers did not earn money when bad weather prevented them from working. While waiting for crops to ripen, or when they traveled from job to job, Cesar believed that something had to change. He believed that these migrant workers deserved to be treated more fairly. He set out to change the treatment of farm workers, and especially migrant workers in California. So one day, Cesar met an organizer for a social service group known as the Community Service Organization, also known as the CSO. So an organizer is someone who brings people and ideas together to accomplish a certain goal. This organization also wanted to improve the lives of Latino people. Cesar volunteered to be a CSO community organizer. He went from farm to farm, helping some farm workers with their day-to-day problems and instructing others on how to become U.S. citizens. Instructing is teaching or guiding someone to do something. So he encouraged all farm workers to register to vote, and he helped to register thousands of new voters. So the word register means to sign up to vote. So he was helping them sign up to vote. Immediately, some of the farm owners thought that Cesar was a troublemaker. Cesar was shy. He did not like speaking in front of large groups of people, but he knew that his work was important. He became the leader of a new CSO group in California. In addition to speaking Spanish, Cesar spoke very good English. As a result, he was able to communicate with both the farm workers, most of whom spoke English, and the farm the farm owners, which most spoke English, and the farm workers, who most spoke Spanish. Slowly, many farm workers became brave enough to attend meetings and rallies organized by Caesar. Without attending to, Caesar had become, without intending to, Caesar had become a labor leader and a civil rights activist. Caesar believed that all farm workers needed a union to represent their best interests. A union is a large, organized group of workers who join together and elect leaders to speak for them. The union leaders try to make sure the members' needs are being met. Caesar knew that a union would have the power to increase wages or pay and provide health care for farm workers. So you guys learned about health care back when we talked about Mary McLeod Bethune. So remember, health care is it would help the people get the medical aid that they would need. And so he and his friend Dolores decided to set up a union called the National Farm Workers Association. Caesar said, "You are never strong enough that you don't need help." And the union was intended to provide that help. Within 2 years, they had 1,000 members. Caesar thought Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had the right idea about protesting in a nonviolent way. He decided to do the same thing. Caesar led marches, fasts, boycotts, but never violent protests. And a fast is when a person does not eat for a certain period of time. One of the most important farm workers' strikes Caesar led was against the grape owners in California. So strikes are stoppages of work that continue until an employer and the workers agree on such things as like more wages or better working conditions, things like that. At the time, Caesar said, "The fight is never about the grapes or lettuce. It's always about the people." The strike began in Delano, California, where grape owners had decided to cut the little pay the farm workers received, so the workers were earning even less money. Caesar responded by organizing not only a strike, but a protest march too. Thousands of farm workers set off for the state capital of Sacramento. They walked for hours each day in the hot sunshine. More and more workers left the vineyards and joined the march. People across the nation noticed what was happening. Many people refused to buy California grapes in sympathy for the plight of the farm workers. So the plight is a very bad situation. If people stop buying grapes, that can be called a boycott. So they walked from Delano to Sacramento. While farm workers were marching, they weren't harvesting the most valuable grapes. The farm workers watched in horror as their precious crops withered and died on the vine. So here they're watching with horror as their fruit that they spent a lot of money to try and get them to grow were dying. They discovered that without their workers, they would lose money. The farm owners recognized Caesar's union and agreed to discuss higher wages and health care for farm workers. The farm workers' march to Sacramento became the longest protest march in American history. It was indeed a victory, but there was more work to be done. Caesar defended farm workers and migrant workers and many other cases of unfair treatment. Thousands of people joined his union. His union opened offices all over the country. Eventually, Caesar's union became known as the United Farm Workers. Later, the United Farm Workers protested against grape growers who used pesticides or poisons intended to kill insects, mice, and rats on their crops. These pesticides harmed workers who harvested the grapes. Caesar called for another boycott of California grapes. Throughout his lifetime, Caesar dedicated himself to working for the rights of poor migrant farm workers who seemed to have no voice in society. That doesn't mean that they didn't have an actual voice. It just means that they didn't have much power, so that even if they were talking, people weren't listening to them. Cesar Chavez died in 1993, and thousands of people attended his funeral. 1 year after his death, Caesar was awarded with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States. His wife, Helena, accepted the award. During his lifetime, Caesar often encouraged his fellow farm workers by saying, "Yes, we can." And he certainly did. So, where was Cesar Chavez born? Cesar Chavez was born in Gila River Valley near Yuma, Arizona. What happened to Cesar's family after the drought that devastated their ranch? The Cesar Chavez family lost their ranch, so they went to California and they became the migrant workers. And life as a migrant worker was very hard. And like for Caesar and his family, they had to move from place to place and they earned very little money. Their whole goal was to be able to move back to Yuma, Arizona to buy back their farm. And they weren't able to do that with making the money that they were making. Cesar Chavez decided to fight for this cause because he felt that migrant workers deserved better treatment and more money. And Caesar decided to organize a protest march because he wanted to get better pay and better working conditions, and as well as health care for the farm workers. The grape owners were very upset about the strike and the march because their grapes were rotting and getting yucky. And so they agreed to increase the amount of money they paid to the migrant workers, and they gave them health care. So what you guys are going to do now is you guys are going to go to the worksheet that is attached, and the worksheet is a Google form, and you are going to put your name, first name, last name. This question has been on all of the, not all of them, but the last 6 lessons in social studies. It was the main cause of the person that we've been talking about. So today's main cause was about Cesar Chavez. So what was his main cause? And you can kind of think about which ones you've already used, because you're only going to use them once. Okay. This one says, what are the 3 important events in his life? This is nothing new. Make sure you restate the question. You need to have complete sentences that have a capital and a punctuation, and you need to have 3 events that happened in Cesar Chavez's life. Then this question says, what are civil rights? Again, you need to restate the question. You need to make sure you have a complete sentence that has capital and punctuation, and you need to have an answer that makes sense. And the last one is describe what Blythe means. And you need to restate the question. You need to have complete sentences that have capital and punctuation. And you need to have an answer that makes sense. So the last 2 questions, you may have more than one sentence. You don't necessarily have to. That's why I put the little S in parentheses to mean that you could have more than one. I hope you enjoyed learning about Cesar Chavez. Tomorrow I will have the last lesson of this unit for you. And that is all. Have a wonderful day. Bye.